Welcome to Small Arms Solutions. Today we're looking at a rather obscure gun, the CETME-L. This is a rather obscure rifle that didn't really have a very successful time, but we're going to talk a little bit about where it came from before we really get into it. During the end of World War II, we saw the introduction of the Sturmgewehr, or the STG-44, MP-44, which was the world's first assault rifle, which utilized an intermediate caliber cartridge right in between that of a pistol and a high-powered rifle. Now, that rifle was pretty much done under wraps. Hitler was really not in supporting of it until it came to him at the end. The rifle was mainly used on the Russian front, where it was extremely successful. There's many people who speculated that if the STG-44 would have been available to the Germans during the early part of the war, it could have made a difference as far as ground combat, because nobody had anything like it. But unfortunately, fortunately, it came at the end of the war, so it didn't really have an effect on what the Germans did. But at the same time that was all going on, the STG-44, the rifle was continuously updated. There was new models that were put out. There was a model that was put out as the STG-45. The STG-45 was the first delayed roller blowback rifle ever produced. That action was used on the MG-42. However, this was the first time that it was put onto a rifle. Well, as the war wrapped up, many of the German gun designers from Mauser and from many of the other companies they left Germany. In fact, this particular rifle here was designed by a gentleman named Ludwig Vorgrimler. This gentleman, after the war, he went to France for a while, then he went over to Spain, and he went to work for a company called CETME. Now, the CETME-58, which is what we know today as the G3, was designed in Spain. The G3, or the HK91, that is actually a Spanish rifle. It was designed in Spain, although it was designed by German designers. And you can tell by the look of it, these still have that look of the Sturmgewehr, of the STG-44, the way the back of the stock is, the way the pistol grip is, as well as the fact that it uses the delayed roller blowback. So the CETME-58 went on to become Spain's rifle, 308 delayed roller blowback, very, very well-made rifle. And at that same time, West Germany, was looking for their own rifle as well. Well, they really liked the FAL. The Germans liked the FAL, but the Belgians were not too far removed from what the Germans did to them during World War II, and there was no way in hell they were going to allow the Germans to produce the FNFAL in Germany. They'd have to buy them from Belgium. So Germany basically said, no way in hell, we're not going to rely on a foreign government to supply our soldiers. So they went with Spain. They got with CETME. They liked the design of the CETME-58, and they started producing them in Germany. It was further developed, and it was manufactured by what we now know as Heckler & Koch. So we're going to move forward. The G3 has had an extremely successful career throughout the world, being used by many, many militaries. It was manufactured in many countries as well. It was a very successful rifle, heavy recoiling rifle, but it was durable and it was reliable. So now we're going to skip through to the 70s when we have our next NATO trials. And the new NATO trials, we're looking for the small caliber high velocity projectile. And as we all know, in the end, the winner was the Belgium SS-109, or we know now as the American M855, the 62-grain full metal jacket with a steel penetrator core. So that became the new production, or the new standard for all NATO countries. So looking at Spain, now there was some talk in Spain that this basic design existed prior to the NATO trials, but there's no way really confirming that or not. But basically what they did was they took their CETME and they sort of scaled it down. Now, this looks a lot like the HK93 or the HK33. It is not. But the only thing that's really in common is they both use the delayed roller blowback. That is about the only thing they have in common. So they're not to be confused, but Spain wanted their own rifle. So it was adopted in 1984. It was replaced in 1999 by the G36. It had a very, very short service life. And it was for good reason. In fact, we saw it with this rifle out the range as well. This thing suffered from many durability and reliability issues. Although it looks like the HK93, HK33, it is not. This is not nearly the quality rifle that one was. The first deliveries of these rifles to the Spanish Army was in 1987. Now, there's not too much record out there of this being sold outside of Spain. Again, this was not a rifle that was really going to hold up very well, to military use, which is why it saw such a very limited service life. So we're going to go into a little bit of the details on this now. What we have here is the CETME-L, or CETME Lightweight. We're starting at the back. It's very similar to every HK that you've seen out there, or every other CETME, where you have the stock that comes off the rear. It's held down by two lock pins. You have a stamped sheet metal receiver, sort of square on top. You have a back sight, which is adjustable for windage only. And you have a front sight similar to that of the M16A1 with an adjustable post. You can use a bullet projectile, or you can use any suitable tool. You have a removable lower trigger module, like you have on all the HKs or the CETME rifles. The original rifles for the military were safe, semi, and automatic. Everything you see on this rifle is all sheets. This is all sheet metal. You have a magazine well. Now, one thing I will say about this magazine well is this rifle, as it was delivered to me, this particular rifle was manufactured by Hill & Mac Gunworks out of a parts kit. The magazine well does not accept many magazines. In fact, it was provided with a Brownell's GI type magazine. I tried several different magazines, including other manufacturers of aluminum magazines, and it did not like them. They would not fit in the magazine well. It's a very tight magazine well. So anybody who gets one of these is going to have a problem. The way this rifle was designed, it was designed to use the Stenag magazine, but to optimize it, they made some modifications to the follower and to the feed lip angles. So in all reality, this rifle did utilize its own magazine. Brownell's was the only one literally we got for it to work with, and we still had some malfunctions with that. You have a standard lower handguard polymer. You have a cold hammer forged barrel. As these were delivered, they were delivered post, NATO adoption of the M855 or the SS109. So you have a 1 7-inch cold hammer forged barrel. Now the early ones had this 3-prong suppressor. The later ones had a bird cage on them. You do have a sling swivel on here on the front, reminiscent of that of the FNFAL. You do have a safety only on the left-hand side. You have nothing on the right-hand side. So now we're going to pull this off of here, and we're going to take a little bit more close look at how this thing operates. To charge the rifle, we have the handle that's very typical of the CETME and the HKs on the left-hand side. Now, when this rifle fires the last shot, it does not hold open on the last shot. But you do have a manual bolt hold open. If you locate the side here, you'll see we have a button. We push in this button, we pull back, we bolt, push it in, and now we have it locked to the rear. But unfortunately, there's no manual release. The only way to release the bolt carrier group is to pull back and release. So that's how you operate the bolt assembly. Magazine release is located right in the front here. You have your adjustment for windage on the right-hand side here. You do have 2 apertures. You have a 400-meter aperture and a 200-meter aperture. And the adjustments for the elevation are done from the front. The pistol grip on here is rather small for my hand. My finger goes right over it, as you can see. So this was developed for somebody with human-sized hands. The trigger pack is not anything like the one used by H&K. It's totally proprietary. Now, this rifle comes to us from a viewer. We want to thank Chris Wing from Marksman Shooting Sports in Indiana. He was graceful enough to loan this rifle to us. The rifle, as he got it, it came directly from Hill & Mac as a complete rifle. Now, Hill & Mac only did a certain number of these rifles. I'm not quite sure. I think the number was around 1,000 that they produced in-house and they sold. And those rifles sold for a pretty penny. They were almost $1,500 for a complete copy. But it was also sold as a parts kit, and it still is to this day. And that CETME-L parts build kit goes for around $800. So people can build these themselves if you have the knowledge of how to work with the sheet metal. The rifle, as you can see, is Cerakoted green, which was the actual color from which it was. So it's about 7.5 pounds. It's a typical weight for a military-style rifle. I mean, you can see that this is definitely obsolete by today's standards. You have no provisions for mounting optics and so forth. The rifle is relatively short. Again, for someone of my stature, who's relatively long arms and broad, this gun's a little bit small for me. Now, the cyclic rate of this thing was a little slow. It was around 650, 700 rounds a minute. And I will say something about the recoil impulse on this. This was a rather interesting recoil impulse. There was none. Due to the fact that you have a massive recoil spring in here, and you have a pretty heavy bolt in here, the recoil just wasn't. It was a very unique feel. There wasn't much to it at all. It was a pleasure to shoot, but then there was also some unpleasantness that goes along with that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take this apart slightly. We're not going to fully do a full field strip on this. This rifle supposedly is very easy to take apart and put back together. All I can say is this particular rifle, to remove the trigger module, was damn near impossible. I had a hell of a time with it. In fact, I even called Hill & Mac and tried to get some directions from them, and they told me that it shouldn't be this hard to get this one apart. So needless to say, it took me a long time to get the pistol grip trigger module back in place, so I'm really not going to mess around with taking that part out, but we're going to take a close look at the bolt and everything. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure we're empty, which we are, no brass, no ammo. Now, like the typical CETME or HK type systems, we have the lock pin, it's a spring loaded lock pin. We're going to push both of those out. And your stock assembly comes right out. And the recoil spring As we can see, a very heavy-duty recoil spring that sits right in the stock assembly. So again, we are not going to be pulling the lower trigger module out. Basically, the way this is done is you would drive out this pin you see right here, and then you would rotate this out of place in the center, and this would normally just pull right out. This one does not do that for some reason. This one here is very, very difficult to get apart and get back together. So as I said, we're just not going to do that. It's not really necessary. You can find many pictures on the internet of the trigger group for the CETME-L. So let's remove the bolt. We just pull it back, and we're going to pull the bolt carrier group right out. So as we can see directly from the bolt carrier, all the reminiscence to the HK 91, 92, 93. We can see the roller blade. We can see the rollers on the left and right hand side. This is in the unlock position. This is a very new rifle still, so this is extremely difficult to take out, so we're not going to bother doing that. This rifle is very tight. It was made from a parts kit. It was made very well. Perhaps it's too tight, considering some of the issues that we had on the range with it. But you can see very difference in the way the rear of the bolt carrier looks, the way that it fits in here. This is all very different from the final standardized ones that were produced by H&K. But it's important to understand that this is not the H&K, although it looks like it. It's not. So as we can see, the green Cerakote. You will notice on Cerakote, when these things eject, they do strike the back of the receiver, and it does chip some of that Cerakote right off. That's one of the things you do see with Cerakote. The anodized aluminum is a little bit better, I think, and some of the Parkerized steel is a little bit better for as far as wear than the Cerakote is. So for reassembly, this is going to be a little more difficult because of the fact that you normally would insert your bolt carrier group before you insert your pistol grip. So what we have in the back of the rifle here is we have the hammer that's sticking up. So in order to insert the bolt carrier group in, we have to depress the hammer. So we're going to go all the way forward. So we're just going to reinstall the back. Make sure that fits in. Now, just like the CETME-58 as well as the HK series delayed roller blowback, you also have a fluted chamber. This rifle also has a fluted chamber to go along with the roller delayed blowback operating system. The purpose of the flute size is to assist with extraction. When the cartridge fires, the gas comes back as bolts going forward. Gas pressure comes rearward as well. And gas gets around the flutes. And what it does is it pushes rearward on that cartridge case to help break the seal and to assist with extraction. And in many cases, rifles that have this type of fluted chamber, the extractor does very little amount of work. It's mostly done by the flutes. But that's not really what we saw here with this rifle on the range. So then what we're going to do is we're going to take this to the range and we're going to see how it shoots. Started going. Well, as you saw from the range, we had some issues. We did have several failures to feed, and we did have, really to my surprise, 2 failures to extract. As you can see from the fired cartridge cases, you can see the marks that are on there from the flutes. So I was extremely surprised to see that I had 2 complete failures to extract. Once the bolt was locked forward again, they were easily removed. But we did have several failures to extract and the failures to feed. Now, as far as the magazine's concerned, I guess I have to say that it was due to the magazine. We did not have a proper CETME-L magazine. I remember having a long conversation after these malfunctions with Michiko, with William there, because he has one of these as well, and he was telling me that this has its own magazine. He has one. He was willing to loan it to me, but unfortunately, the shooting was already done with it, and we were pretty much done with it. So anybody who does get one of these, you really want to try to find original CETME magazines. Again, even though that it comes with the Brownells magazine, you really need to try to find some of the original CETME-L magazines that do have the modified feed lips and the modified follower. For as far as recoil was concerned, like I said, it was beautiful. It had a very, very light recoil to it. The rifle really didn't move at all. Accuracy, I didn't really shoot any targets with it. This was very, very typical for that of an iron sight rifle. It shot very well with what my limited eyesight could see. We only shot it out to 75 yards. The groups were within about 2.5 inches, but you have to understand that's my eyes too. I don't have eagle eyes any longer, getting a little bit older. The rifle was a pleasure to shoot. As I said, it was the malfunctions were disappointing. But come to find out was a lot of the reasons why it was replaced by the HK G36 later on, actually not too far after it was adopted. It did have those kinds of issues. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment. I'll try to get back to you. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you do, please click like, please subscribe, and even better, share. Thank you.